All right, I'm David Agranoff. I'm author of Boo Boys of the Wolf Rag, Punk Rock Ghost Story, and the recently released Flesh Trade, co-written with Edward Morris. Um, and I'm here with Marvin Vernon. We're going to talk about The Boy on the Bridge. Marvin, can you tell the people who you are?
Sure. As you already said, my name is Marvin Vernon. I am a book reviewer. I do science fiction, horror, and sometimes mystery. I have my own book review blog called The Novel Pursuit, but you can also catch me on Goodreads. Aside from that, I also do reviews for a various horror sites such as Hell Note and By Zombie. And currently, with not for long, Dark Discovery, which unfortunately is a physical magazine that unfortunately is going to be in its lifespan.
Right. All right, so we're going to talk about Boy on the Bridge by M.R. Carey, Mike Carey. And this is, I'm sure some of you will have found this on YouTube, and we're just going to have a discussion about the book. I read it probably over a month ago. Actually, I read it on my way to watch the totality of the solar eclipse on my flight back to the Midwest. And so I read most of it in one sitting on the plane, which was a good way to read it. It's a good plane read. And what we want to do is basically, provide a discussion first without spoilers, and then we'll get more serious into what happened in the novel. So let me just intro. If you don't know who M.R. Carey is, it is a pen name for Mike Carey, who was primarily known for writing comics. He wrote Lucifer, which has been recently made into a TV show, and wrote many of the best issues of Hellblazer. In fact, I don't know about you, Marvin, but he's my favorite Hellblazer writer. But I don't know if you're even a Hellblazer reader, actually, now that I think about it.
No, I'm not. I've actually never heard of Mike Carey until somebody's told me Mike Carey is Mike Carey.
Oh, okay. So, he wrote, and he had a series of horror novel series about a exorcist named Felix Castor that were okay. I read two of the books. I shouldn't say I read all of them, but I read two of them. They were okay. But I really feel like, I don't know, when he changed his name to M.R. Carey and he wrote The Girl with All the Gifts was definitely, for me, as somebody who's already a fan of his writing, I think he went to another level with that. We'll get back to that in a little bit. But I just wanted to give people some context for who Mike Carey is, if you're not familiar. It's a very popular book, The Girl with All the Gifts, so I'm assuming that there are probably some people who are fans of that book who don't even know or haven't even read the Mike Carey books. Now, the Felix Castor books are really similar to Hellblazer, actually, and The Exorcist in it, like, he uses a flute to do the exorcisms, and they're really good books. The one thing that I always had a problem with is that he wrote them in present tense. Which was really weird, like a screenplay tense. But whatever. They are what they are. But you saw, Marvin, you saw the movie of The Girl with All the Gifts, but you haven't read the first book, right?
That's correct. I have not read the first book. I did see the movie. In fact, I watched the movie again this week, just knowing we're going to be doing this review. Immediately after I read The Boy in the Bridge.
Well, and I should say this, as somebody who read the book first before the movie was made, the movie is really, really faithful. So I would say it's slightly better than the movie, and I'm not one of those people that automatically always assumes the book is better. For example, Children of Men is a fantastic movie and a totally garbage book. It happens from time to time. But in the case of The Girl with All the Gifts, it is pretty close to the book. But the book, The Girl with All the Gifts, was I'm not sure if it was the year before or 2 years ago. I think it was 2 years ago. It was in my top 10 reads of the year. It was definitely a fantastic read. And one thing I will say about The Girl with All the Gifts is, whether it's the movie or the book, you're better off if you go into it as cold as possible, if you know as little about the plot as possible. And that's why it's kind of hard to talk in general about this series without giving away some of the things that make it fun, because the mystery and the way it unfolds. Because part of The Girl with All the Gifts is that in the beginning you don't really understand what's going on. You know that there are these kids and they're in this prison and they're being used for experiments, but you're not really sure what's going on. So it takes away some of the elements of this is just another zombie book, right? And and so if you know that going in, it kind of takes away a little bit of it. But I'm assuming that some of the people that listen to this have read The Girl with All the Gifts and want a clue into The Boy in the Bridge, or maybe you finished Boy in the Bridge and you just want to think about it more and you want more discussion. So that's what we're here to do. Your initial thoughts on reading The Boy on the Bridge with on a non-spoiler level, how did you feel about it?
Well, I gave it 5 stars. I think that pretty much says how much I liked it. I think you can read Boy on the Bridge without having any idea about The Girl with All the Gifts. You basically are. It happened quite a few years before. I think at 20, and so you're going into it pretty fresh. You really don't need to know much about The Girl with All the Gifts to enjoy the book, although I think it will help you. You kind of have some aha moments as you read it because of that. The Boy on the Bridge I found to be quite an exhilarating novel. It had a lot of action, and also it's very interesting on an intellectual level. Without giving spoilers, essentially you have 12 people in the novel, all on a sort of large terrain vehicle called Rosie, and so you're learning about these 12 people in a very claustrophobic environment, and then as they relate to the world that they see, the zombie holocaust basically. And I think that's where I found it so interesting to have this small, what I call microcosm of society of these 12 people on on this vehicle. And on that level, and on the level of a beginning world building of this apocalypse, get that word out there, apocalypse, I found it quite interesting, and I really enjoyed it all the way through.
Right, and I think the characters were they're very important to this book, and the differences and the things that are going on between the characters really push the plot forward, and it's a very character-centric story, and I think that some apocalypse novels kind of deal with the concept or the pitch of the idea, more so. And I think, while there is a high concept here in this novel, I think the lens is really focused on the characterizations, like Dr. Khan and what was the savant character's name? Stephen
Graves.
Yeah, Stephen Graves. And in particular, I think those two characters were really, really strong. I know some people probably have a hard time getting used to Stephen Graves as a character and I know I've heard sometimes him referred to as autistic, and speaking to somebody who works with autism, I think he's more of a savant than and if he is autistic, he's high functioning for sure, but I think between those two characters we're it gives the novel a very different feel, and they're definitely the window to which we view the story.
Yes, I can see that. But Stephen Greaves actually was my favorite character, and I think one of the strong points of the book is that Carey wrote about his character, wrote about Stephen in a way that you really sort of perceived what was going on in his eyes. You could understand his almost paranoia about the others and his discomfort
Right.
as it went along. I think that was one of the strong points of the novel.
Right. And so, if you look at it, one of the things that's the strength of The Girl with All the Gifts is that it takes a genre, subgenre, and kind of subverts all the tropes and does something totally different and has a totally different like way of getting into the story via the children. And in a sense, The Boy on the Bridge is a little bit more straightforward, but partially because it goes backwards and it tells us the early parts of the apocalypse. So before we get into like nitty gritty talking about details of the book that involve spoilers, why don't we just like give an overall summary of. You can start with this. Like, how do you recommend this book? Is it high on your list for the year? How did you feel about it overall, Marvin?
Well, I'm definitely looking at it as one of the top 10, and I was very impressed by it. Now, of course, as you already said, this is the first Carey book I have read of any, Mike or MR, and I was very impressed by it. I highly recommend it, and I recommend it pretty much for anyone, not just those who read horror science fiction. I think there's enough going on in it that people who simply like conventional style fiction would really enjoy this novel a lot. I think it would have a high audience.
Well, and that's one of the things that's interesting is The Girl with All the Gifts was a big surprise hit. They didn't. If an author is not even marketing it under his main name, I'm assuming he didn't. He didn't foresee it becoming his biggest hit. And definitely, this book was a surprise cult hit. It was very successful. The word of mouth on this book was on The Girl with All the Gifts was huge, to the point that his next M.R. Carey book, Fellside, which was not in this universe, they went through a lot to, they put The Girl with All the Gifts in a little circle on the cover, and they did everything they could to try and connect it to The Girl with All the Gifts, to the point where I thought that was a sequel to The Girl with All the Gifts when I picked it up to read it, and it was not. It was totally different, and not as strong, by the way. So for me, the boy on the bridge is not quite as good as The Girl with All the Gifts, but a really, really solid follow-up to it. I did really, really enjoy it, but it did not have the huge impact on me that The Girl with All the Gifts did, as far as like that one just blew me away. Although there were moments when we get into spoilers that I was really, really, really impressed by. But I think you're right. I think this is a book with mass appeal. Science fiction readers could get into it. Horror readers for sure. And the strong characters really, really make that happen. So, all right, we're gonna do our spoiler horn. And here at the 14-minute and 30-second mark, we are going into spoilers. So, the thing about The Boy on the Bridge is that it is not a sequel; it's a prequel. And what worked for me is because it had been a long time a couple years since I read The Girl with All the Gifts, and I saw the movie right when it came out. But when I started reading it, I just assumed it was a sequel, that it took place around the same time of the events or in the future. And so for a good portion of the book, I didn't realize that it was happening earlier. And it may have been on me. I may have missed little clues or whatever. But what was cool is that it provided an aha moment for me later in the book to realize, like, oh wait, they're still developing the E blockers, which are the things they put on their skin to keep them from being smelled by the Hungaries, right? And so for that reason, later for me, it was almost like a twist to realize that it was a prequel, because we never hear years or dates or anything like that. And so I know that it probably wouldn't be the same for you because you hadn't read the first book, but that was one thing that I really enjoyed about the way that it rolled out.
Well, when I read it, I didn't know it was a prequel. I already seen some information on it. For those who haven't read it, as a prequel, it's actually 20 years before the girl with all the gift, but it's also 10 years after the beginning of the apocalypse. So that gives you kind of a time frame where they are.
Yeah, and it gives it, and in that sense, there's some really neat moments with the place they're at in the universe in that time towards the apocalypse, with trying to find food and those kinds of things. And in that sense, the girl with all the gifts, like being so far in the future, what that does is that it creates a totally new kind of environment. But I think one of the things that was tough probably for Carey in developing this prequel is that the kids in The Girl with All the Gifts and that little world is such a huge part of what hooks you in the first one, right? And he couldn't do that here, right? So it was cool that he found a way to create interesting characters. And it's funny because Rosie, the tank, right, the all-terrain vehicle, is kind of briefly mentioned in The Girl with All the Gifts, and I in that sense I should have seen it coming, but I didn't remember it, and I had to go back and flip through the book to find references to it, and they're small references to it.
Yeah, actually, for those who have seen the movie, you do see Rosie at the later part of the film.
Right, and so what I think is cool is that it adds texture to the world, but in the same sense, like, you could go back now and read The Girl with All the Gifts as a sequel if you've already read The Boy on the Bridge, but for me, it was cool to do it this way because that discovery, right, of the fact that these kids are sort of like the zombies, but not all the way. The reveal in The Girl with All the Gifts was done so well because it was such a good mystery that the Boy on the Bridge story is better to go second, if you know what I'm saying.
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure you could read this book without having any information on the girl with all the gifts and still enjoy it quite a lot.
Oh yeah, I agree. And in that sense, like, and I thought about that a lot because, well, that's when I started to figure out, oh wait, this is a prequel, is like, you realize that they're discovering these kids, and it kind of gives this background of what is setting up The Girl with All the Gifts. Now, on to some of the things that... now, I know you said you like Stephen as a character. There's a part in chapter 38. It's on pages 241 to 244. And Dr. Khan is bit, right? And she's infected. And Stephen realizes that he has, like, maybe a minute, 30 seconds. I don't have the book in front of me right now, but he has a very short amount of time to to perform an operation.
Yeah, basically save her life. Yes.
Yes, and the way it was written was really cool because what he did is he basically did all the steps second by second, and so it was just he'd have the countdown and the action like you know um, 1 minute 30 seconds grab bandages, 1 minute 35 seconds open bandages, and I can see where somebody might be annoyed by that, but I thought it was really cool, just something I hadn't seen before. But what it does is it shows action and character at the same time, right? One little bit, but it also sets up a moment much later where Dr. Khan is basically like saying to Steven like, "Hey, thanks for saving me," and he basically has like a a very analytical approach to saying like, I had a reason for doing this. I didn't really do it. And even though we know he has feelings for her, but he basically coldly tells her, like, I didn't really think I was saving your life, right?
Right, remember that. Yes.
Yeah, I had a reason for doing that. And those were two of my favorite moments in the actual writing of the book. And those showed me, like, some real storytelling strength from M.R. Carey. I don't know if you had any moments for you that felt strong like that.
Well, that part went very much in the character of Stephen. Throughout the book, we get kind of sense of what he's about, what he can and can't do. He's terrible at confronting. He really hates being confronted. He'd rather be isolated and going on with what he loves to do and the problems he loves to solve. And like I said before, he was my favorite character. And a lot of that had to do with that, how he may have been different than the others, but he really understood where it was coming from. I have to like the place where the children first come out and we start to meet them. I thought there was a great spot in the beginning with Stephen, which he had gone out at night to observe the zombie-like creatures, they call them the Hungries. And he had learned how to use an e-blocker and how to move. He had learned how to move around them. And he started to realize there's one girl who is not like the others and is not a hungry, or may not be a hungry, but is definitely recognizing him, and he doesn't understand how. And you get that sense from him that, wait, this isn't supposed to be happening. It's supposed to be happening the way I think it's supposed to be happening. And it throws him off. And I thought that was both a nice scene, a lot of tension, a lot of excitement, but also it helped with the character of Stephen.
Well, and it also did a good job of setting up like a really creepy atmosphere. And I think, since a lot of zombie stories or zombie-like stories like kind of rely on the run around killing zombies and the kind of gore and action of it, is one of the things that was cool about both The Girl with All the Gifts and Boy in the Bridge is that there's parts that come from the concept, but partially from the characters and the setting, that really create moments of creepiness. Like it's a really, like, when they have to leave Rosie, when he leaves Rosie at night, and when Khan has to go out to try and find him, right? And all those moments, it's very creepy. And on top of it, being inside Rosie and the inner dynamics that they have as characters creates an isolation and a claustrophobia when they figure out that Dr. Khan is pregnant. When everyone figures out that Dr. Khan is pregnant and they have no way to get her back, and then here comes the baby and they're in this like really tight situation. It just gives the book a tight tension that a lot of books in this subgenre just don't have. And that's one of the things that I think worked for me is like, the Boy on the Bridge has just atmosphere, I don't know. That's, for me, that was one of the things that I really liked about it. But
Yeah, the claustrophobic feeling, the interaction of the people within this very small environment, that was all something. Actually, the creepiest person, I don't have the book in front of me either, but maybe you remember his name. He's the gunner.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he's the creepiest person to me because in a lot of ways he's probably the most practical and I don't want to say human, but very practical. And he's the one that I kept wondering, when is this guy going to go off?
Right.
And it's from the beginning, it's pretty obvious that this person had his own agenda and he has his own problems, and they're going to be, because of the claustrophobic environment, they're going to come across, and they do.
Well, and this might come down to the marketing, but one thing that was really interesting is that with the title "The Girl with All the Gifts," having the boy in the title, right, was probably, somewhat of a marketing decision. They probably told him, like, you're gonna have to have the boy somewhere in it. And but the actual title character, the boy on the bridge, is dead, um, and doesn't have any agency in the book, and is really in a lot of ways a MacGuffin, you know. But if you think about it, at first I was thinking, I was kind of critical of the title of, like, well, this dead kid on the bridge doesn't have really a lot to do with it. But if you think about it, that body pays off or leads into the events of The Girl with All the Gifts, because it's so much of how Stephen can start to study the kids that are kind of half hungries or whatever, but yeah, overall, go ahead, Marvin.
The title itself also, I think, has a deeper meaning too, and maybe I'm putting too much into that, but this novel and What Happened in Girl on the Grid, Stephen himself is sort of the bridge between the two.
Yeah.
What he discovered moved on. What he discovered will move on to a new area, and eventually to what happened with Girl in the Grid. With all the gifts, so that may be another way to look at the title.
All right, so let's we're at right around the length that we wanted to do, half an hour. So let's kind of wrap things up. But I hope that people listening to this, if they already read the book and just wanted some more insight into it, will take the time to check out some of our other reviews and things that we've done. We also, you and I recorded this is our second time recording a book review like this. We did B.K. Evenson and James D. Monaco's Feral last year. Which is funny because it's kind of it's in that similar, like, sort of zombie genre, right? So
science fiction horror too.
Yeah, and so we'll have to next time do something that is not a sort of zombie book.
Yeah.
But I hope you will check out more of our reviews. But in the meantime, I just wanted to say that I think the Boy on the Bridge is a really good example of M.R. Carey's work, but I definitely preferred The Girl with All the Gifts. It's just a little bit slightly better. But I hope that people will check out Mike Carey's earlier work, especially some of the issues that he did of Hellblazer. You can see a real intense creativity of ideas. It's one of the reasons why I always liked Mike Carey's issues of Hellblazer and his take on Constantine. Any last thoughts, Marvin?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of anything I could add about the book itself. Now, if you haven't read The Girl with All the Gifts, but you don't want to go into a code, this sounds a little funny to say because I usually don't like movie over book, but the movie actually is a good way to kind of fill that gap. And you'll get a sense, and you also, as the book goes on, you will see in the book, it will help you kind of bridge between the two.
Well, and it is an excellent movie. It is
It
really well done. Yeah, and I'm sure Mike Carey himself is probably pretty happy with it. I don't see why he wouldn't be. It's a pretty faithful adaptation, and that doesn't happen every day. Um, but yes, yeah. So last thing I just wanted to say, yeah, definitely if you haven't read The Girl with All the Gifts, check out that one too. And check out the other works of Mike Carey, and check out both of our blogs. We've got lots of book reviews, and Marvin will record again. We just gotta look for other books that we've both read. So maybe after we stop recording, we'll look and see what we've both got on tap. Any other thoughts?
No, just to remind you though, my blog is Novel Pursuit, and come by, take a look at it, leave a comment, let me know what you think about it, and hopefully we'll be doing this again.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Thanks a lot. Talk to you
Yeah,
guys
thank you.
later.